chance. They make you wanna take it, take it, take it, take it, take it, take it. That's why make music. That's damnation. Damnation in France. That's Willa May. Warm cookies. If you're doing it professionally. WDM Nation Media. ThinkTimm. Tell me what you think about that. Wearing all the hats, curator of the undefined, speaker of the funk, driver of the car, the one who told you you could be what you want. Whatever you want, you can be a star. We're talking to you. WDM and Willa May. ThinkTimm. Damnation. We are talking to you. Peace and be well.
Welcome back to I Make Music. I am Willa May, and today we are going to talk about something that most people probably do not like admitting out loud. Sometimes the bad guy is simply more interesting. Not better, not kinder, not more honest. Not someone you would necessarily invite into your home, lend money to, or leave alone near anything expensive, but interesting. Oh, absolutely. The villain often walks into the room with better dialogue, stronger lighting, a sharper wardrobe, and the irritating confidence of someone who has never once questioned whether they belong there. Meanwhile, the hero is standing in the corner, trying to do the right thing, explain the rules, protect the innocent, and remind everyone that actions have consequences. Admirable, certainly exciting. Well, that depends on who is telling the story. We are raised to believe that good should triumph over evil, truth should defeat deception, and decent people should eventually receive some form of reward for remaining decent. That is the promise. Be honest. Work hard. Treat people properly. Follow the rules. Do not cheat. Do not steal. Do not manipulate people. Do not become the sort of person who needs dramatic music every time they enter a building. Yet the moment we turn on a television, open a social media app, watch a sporting event, follow a political campaign, listen to a controversial artist, or become fascinated by a public scandal, the rules seem to change. Suddenly, the loudest person gets the attention. The most disruptive person controls the conversation. The person causing the problem becomes more famous than the people trying to solve it. And somewhere along the way, we begin watching the bad guy very closely. That does not always mean we approve. Curiosity and approval are not the same thing, although the modern world has become rather skilled at confusing the two. You can be disturbed by someone and still want to know what they will do next. You can dislike a character and still admit that the story becomes dull whenever they leave the screen. You can disagree with a public figure while knowing every detail of their latest controversy. You can claim that someone deserves no more attention, then spend the next 45 minutes discussing them with complete emotional commitment. Human beings are fascinating like that. We often reward the very behavior we insist we want to discourage, simply because we cannot look away. And villains understand attention. In fact, attention may be their greatest weapon. A traditional hero must usually earn trust, demonstrate character, make sacrifices, overcome doubt, and prove that their motives are sincere. The villain can skip half of that. The villain only needs to interrupt the room. One outrageous statement, one reckless decision, one public betrayal, one scandalous entrance, and suddenly everyone is watching. Goodness may require patience. chaos has excellent marketing. This is not merely a discussion about fictional monsters, comic book tyrants, wicked witches, criminal masterminds, or beautifully dressed people delivering sinister monologues from unusually expensive chairs. The bad guy exists in every form of storytelling because conflict exists in every part of life. Sometimes the villain is obvious. Sometimes the villain believes they are the hero. Sometimes the audience believes it too. Sometimes the person labeled dangerous is exposing a system that benefits from keeping them quiet. Other times, a genuinely destructive person is repackaged as bold, fearless, authentic, misunderstood, or refreshingly honest. The label changes depending on who owns the camera, who controls the microphone, who writes the headline, and who profits from the reaction. That is where this becomes complicated. We do not all root for the same people, because we do not all agree on who the bad guy is. One person's rebel is another person's threat. One person's truth teller is another person's manipulator. One person's underdog is another person's sit. Opportunist. Morality becomes remarkably flexible. One's identity, loyalty, money, power, entertainment, politics, romance, fame, and personal resentment enter the conversation. People will excuse behavior from someone they admire that they would condemn immediately in someone they dislike. We do not always judge the action first. Quite often, we judge who performed it, whose side they appear to be on, and whether their success makes us feel represented. And let us be honest, villains are often allowed to say the things other characters are too polite, frightened, disciplined, or socially responsible to say. They are allowed to be selfish. They are allowed to be angry. They are allowed to want power without pretending otherwise. They are allowed to admit that revenge feels satisfying, that winning matters, that rules can be inconvenient, and that sometimes people do not want justice nearly as much as they want their side to win. The villain can expose uncomfortable truths, while still being completely wrong about what should be done with them. That contradiction is part of the attraction. A dangerous person can make a valid observation. A sympathetic person can make a terrible decision. A hero can become arrogant. A villain can become understandable. Human behavior rarely arrives with labels already attached. Perhaps that is why the clean, spotless hero sometimes struggles too. Hold our attention. Perfection creates distance. Flaws create recognition. A character who always knows the correct answer may be admirable, but a character who is wounded, resentful, impulsive, jealous, ambitious, frightened, or furious may feel more familiar. We understand temptation because we experience it. We understand anger because we carry it. We understand the desire to break a rule, prove someone wrong, take control, settle a score, or stop pretending to be endlessly reasonable. Most people do not act on every dark impulse they have, thankfully, but they recognize the impulse when they see it performed safely on a screen, expressed through music, acted out in competition, or projected through someone else's public behavior. There is also a strange freedom attached to the bad guy. Heroes are usually burdened with responsibility. They must protect people, preserve order, inspire hope, and remain morally consistent while everyone around them behaves like they were raised by wolves. Villains are free to improvise. They can change the rules, expose hypocrisy, mock tradition, reject respectability, and refuse to ask permission. That freedom can look powerful, particularly to people who feel ignored, controlled, restricted, humiliated, or underestimated in their own lives. The audience may not want the villain's consequences, but they may envy the villain's lack of hesitation. Of course, there is a difference between enjoying a fictional villain and empowering a destructive person in real life. Stories give us distance. Reality sends invoices. On screen, the explosion ends when the credits roll. In real life, somebody must rebuild the building, repair the relationship, replace the money, correct the lie, heal from the damage, or live with the consequences. Entertainment can make recklessness look stylish, because entertainment rarely follows every victim home. It can turn cruelty into charisma, domination into confidence, obsession into romance, and manipulation into genius. The story keeps moving, the soundtrack swells. The villain delivers one brilliant line, and the audience forgets that somebody in the background has just had a truly dreadful afternoon. Still, we keep watching. We watch because conflict creates movement. We watch because danger creates suspense. We watch because uncertainty keeps the mind engaged. We watch because the bad guy threatens to disrupt the order of things, and part of us wants to know whether that order deserved protecting in the first place. Sometimes the villain represents destruction. Sometimes the villain represents change. Sometimes those two things look remarkably similar at the beginning. So, when we ask why people root for the bad guy, we are not asking one simple question. We are asking why charisma can overpower character, why confidence can be mistaken for competence, why controversy can become currency, why rebellion feels romantic, why audiences forgive some people and punish others, why outrage creates loyalty, why media systems repeatedly elevate the most disruptive voice in the room, why we can recognize danger and still find it entertaining, and perhaps most importantly, we are asking what our fascination with villains reveals about us. Because the villain is never only the person standing on the other side of the story. The villain is also a mirror, a distorted mirror, perhaps, a dramatic mirror with suspiciously flattering lighting, but a mirror nonetheless. It reflects the impulses we control, the anger we hide, the freedom we envy, the power we question, and the rules we secretly wonder about breaking. That does not make wrongdoing right. It does not make cruelty admirable. It does not excuse harm. But it does explain why the bad guy keeps receiving the best lines, the largest headlines, the loudest reactions, and occasionally, against all common sense, the most loyal fan base. So settle in. Keep your moral compass nearby, but do check that it is actually pointing north and not merely toward your favorite person. Today, we are examining the attraction, the contradiction, the spectacle, and the uncomfortable honesty behind rooting for the bad guy. This is why I make music. And as always, we are not here to tell you what to think. We are here to make it considerably harder not to.
2, 3, 4. I plan and plan, connect the dots. Every rail aligned, every ticking clock. Mastermind alone, meticulous touch. One wrong move, never too much. Tick, 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 it's all aligned. Didn't I say it won't go your way? Live long enough, build enough stuff. The hero flips, becomes the villain. Black hat, cloak and all. Villain. Won't catch you when you fall. Villain. Misunderstood in the mirror, they see good. Villain. Yeah, convinced they're saving the falsehood. complete. Opposition crushed beneath my feet. I only meant to clean the sky, but the weather don't listen, it multiplies. Meant well, went wrong, can't tell. Didn't I say it won't go your way? Live long enough, shine bright enough, your cape turns gray. You'll be the villain. Black hat, cloak and dog. Villain. Won't catch you when you fall. Villain. Perhaps, possibly misunderstood. In their mind they mean good. I see the fear, but I'm the only one who keeps you here. Don't villainize me. I want control, absolute, complete. Bow down, call it love, call it fate. You'll respect me when it's too late. Villain. Black hat, cloak and all. Villain. You'll remember when you fall. Villain. Misunderstood but still divine. Villain. In their story I was saving time. Tick. Hero turns, villain learns. Tick. Hero turns, villain learns. Tick. Tick. Hero turns, villain learns.
Before we start blaming movies, music, television, politics, algorithms, childhood trauma, bad parenting, capitalism, the internet, or whichever cultural suspect has been dragged into the interrogation room this week, we probably need to begin with the most inconvenient possibility of all. Human beings may simply be wired to pay closer attention when something feels dangerous, uncertain, or out of place. Peace is lovely. Stability is necessary. Kindness is admirable. None of those things, however, automatically demand that you stop what you are doing and look directly at them. Danger does. Conflict does. An unpredictable person entering the room does. A raised voice, a sudden movement, a suspicious silence, an unexplained expression, or the feeling that somebody may be about to break the rules can immediately reorganize your attention. That does not mean people secretly want disaster. It means the human mind is designed to notice what may threaten, disrupt, or alter the environment. The pleasant background can remain in the background. The possible problem becomes the headline. That is one reason villains are so effective as characters. They introduce instability. The hero may be intelligent, courageous, generous, disciplined, and morally sound, but the villain is often the person who changes the temperature of the room. The villain creates the question, what are they going to do? How far are they willing to go? What do they know that everyone else does not? What rule are they about to ignore? A hero usually enters a story with obligations. Protect the innocent. Prevent the catastrophe. Save the family. Defend the city. Keep the promise. Do the right thing, even when doing the right thing is difficult. The villain enters with possibilities. That difference matters. Responsibility can be deeply admirable, but unpredictability is frequently more stimulating. One character must operate within a moral structure. The other may treat the structure as optional furniture. This is where fascination can easily be mistaken for admiration. Watching a villain closely does not necessarily mean we approve of what the villain is doing. Attention is not allegiance. Curiosity is not consent. There are criminals, tyrants, manipulators, abusers, and destructive public figures whom people study precisely because their behavior is disturbing. The mind tries to understand disruption. It looks for patterns. It wants to know how the person thinks, what motivated them, where the limits are, and whether their actions could have been predicted. Sometimes the attraction is not, I want to be like that person. Sometimes it is, I need to understand how a person becomes that. Those are not the same impulse. Although modern culture has become extraordinarily poor at recognizing the difference between examining something and endorsing it, villains also give people a safe location to explore emotions that polite society expects them to manage quietly. Anger, jealousy, revenge, resentment, envy, insecurity, humiliation, greed, and the desire to regain control are not rare emotional defects reserved for a specially selected group of terrible people. They are ordinary human responses that can appear in almost anyone. Most people learn to regulate them, disguise them, redirect them, discuss them privately, turn them into jokes, take them to therapy, put them into music, or sit in the car for 5 additional minutes before walking into the house. The villain often does the opposite. The villain acts. They say the cruel thing. They take revenge. They refuse forgiveness. They demand recognition. They pursue power. They make the decision that the average person may briefly imagine and then wisely abandon because consequences, laws, relationships, employment, morality, and common sense remain operational. Watching that fictional decision play out creates emotional distance. A person can explore rage through a character without punching a wall. They can experience revenge through a story without destroying their actual life. They can follow a character into obsession, arrogance, or selfishness while remaining safely seated on the sofa with snacks. Fiction allows people to examine forbidden impulses without having to become the person who acts upon them. The villain carries the emotional contraband through customs. The audience gets to inspect it without necessarily claiming ownership. That inspection can be strangely relieving because real people are expected to maintain a much cleaner public image than their internal lives can honestly support. We are supposed to be patient, reasonable, gracious, emotionally mature, forgiving, productive, cooperative, and somehow completely unbothered by people who repeatedly test every one of those qualities. Most adults understand that civilization depends upon restraint. We cannot all respond to every inconvenience with a dramatic monologue and a collapsing building. Still, restraint has a psychological cost. The parts of ourselves that want to scream, quit, confront, expose, retaliate, or walk away without explanation do not disappear merely because we know better. They remain present, usually quieter, hopefully supervised, but present. The villain frequently represents the fantasy of unsupervised emotion. They are not asking whether their response is appropriate. They are not reviewing the group chat before sending. They are not rewriting the email 6 times to sound professional. They are not saying, perhaps I should take the weekend and revisit this when I feel more centered. They have already purchased the dramatic coat, entered through the side door, and prepared an unnecessarily elaborate speech. That lack of restraint is dangerous in reality, but compelling in fiction because it exaggerates something recognizable. The audience sees a distorted version of impulses they have felt in smaller, more manageable forms. Power is another important part of the attraction. Villains are often presented as people who possess certainty, command, resources, intelligence, influence, physical strength, social control, or a complete absence of embarrassment. They enter spaces as though they belong there. They speak as though disagreement is merely a temporary administrative delay. Even when they are completely wrong, they may display the confidence of a person who was never once considered lowering. Their voice. Confidence is magnetic, and unfortunately, the human mind does not always verify whether confidence is attached to wisdom, competence, or moral character before responding to it. This is why dangerous people can appear charismatic. Charisma is not proof of goodness. Confidence is not evidence of truth. Composure is not the same as innocence. Yet people often use outward certainty as a shortcut when evaluating someone. A person who appears decisive may feel safer than a person who is visibly uncertain, even when the uncertain person is carefully considering reality and the decisive person is confidently manufacturing nonsense. Villains are frequently written with strong identities. They know what they want. They know who they blame. They know what they believe. They may be delusional, destructive, or spectacularly incorrect, but they are rarely vague. In a world filled with confusion, hesitation, compromise, mixed messages, and people beginning sentences with, "I do not know," but certainty can feel like power. The hero, by comparison, is often burdened with doubt because moral people understand that choices affect others. Heroes hesitate because they recognize consequences. They question themselves because they do not want to become the thing they are fighting. They may possess greater integrity, but integrity creates internal friction. The villain can appear freer because the villain has removed the debate. That freedom is usually false. It often leads directly to obsession, isolation, paranoia, or destruction. Still, from a distance, the absence of hesitation can look like liberation. There is also a rebellious quality attached to many villains. They reject rules, institutions, traditions, social expectations, or systems that other characters accept. Sometimes the system they oppose is genuinely corrupt. Sometimes their criticism is accurate, even when their solution is monstrous. That combination makes the audience uncomfortable because a villain can identify a real problem and still respond to it in an indefensible way. Recognizing truth inside a villain's argument does not make the villain correct in total. It simply makes the character more complex. People are often drawn to that complexity because real life rarely arrives with perfect moral packaging. A harmful person may make one accurate observation. A good person may make a selfish decision. Someone can be wounded and still wound others. Someone can experience injustice and later use that injustice as permission to become unjust. Human beings are capable of carrying pain and causing pain at the same time. Villains who reflect those contradictions feel more psychologically believable than characters who are evil only because the story requires someone to own the darker wardrobe. A compelling villain often begins with a wound. Humiliation, loss, betrayal, fear, or sense of powerlessness. The wound does not excuse the behavior, but it explains the emotional road that led toward it. Explanation and excuse are constantly confused, although they perform entirely different jobs. An explanation asks how something happened. An excuse argues that the person should not be held responsible. We can understand how resentment developed without approving of what resentment produced. We can recognize trauma without granting trauma unlimited authority. We can see the frightened person beneath the destructive behavior and still insist that the destructive behavior remain. That distinction is essential because people often become uncomfortable when a villain is humanized. There is a fear that understanding someone will soften judgment. In reality, understanding can sharpen judgment. When evil is presented as something mysterious, inhuman, and completely separate from ordinary life, people can reassure themselves that they would always recognize it. They imagine cruelty entering the room with dramatic music and announcing its intentions. Real harm is often far less theatrical. It can be charming, insecure, intelligent, frightened, persuasive, funny, wounded, polite, ambitious, or convinced that it is doing the right thing. Understanding the psychological mechanics does not make those mechanics harmless. It makes them easier to identify. Villains also invite the audience to test moral boundaries. How much sympathy is too much sympathy? At what point does a painful past stop explaining present behavior? Can a person be redeemable after causing irreversible damage? Does genuine regret matter when the consequences remain? Can someone believe they are saving the world while destroying everyone who lives in it? These questions do not have easy answers, which is precisely why they hold attention. The hero can sometimes represent the answer. The villain represents the argument. That argument becomes even more powerful when the villain expresses thoughts the audience has been discouraged from saying aloud. Perhaps the system is unfair. Perhaps the respected institution is corrupt. Perhaps the hero is self-righteous. Perhaps the rules protect people who already have power. Perhaps politeness has been used to silence justified anger. A villain may expose hypocrisy, challenge authority, or identify a contradiction everyone else has agreed to ignore. The audience may nod at the diagnosis while rejecting the treatment. Once again, agreement with one point does not require enrollment. In the entire program, there is a psychological pleasure in seeing hypocrisy confronted, even by someone whose methods are unacceptable. People become frustrated when authority figures demand rules they do not follow, when powerful institutions preach values they do not practice, or when individuals present themselves as morally superior while quietly behaving otherwise. A villain who tears the mask away may temporarily feel satisfying because exposure restores a sense of balance. The danger comes when the pleasure of exposure becomes so strong that people stop evaluating what the exposer intends to do next. The most effective villains often understand this. They do not begin by asking the audience to support cruelty. They begin by naming a grievance. They offer recognition. They tell the frustrated person, "You are not imagining it. You have been ignored. You have been mistreated. The system has failed you." That recognition can be emotionally powerful. Once trust is established, the villain expands the argument. The grievance becomes permission. The wound becomes identity. The enemy becomes less human. The solution becomes more extreme. By the time the cruelty arrives, it has been wrapped in the language of justice, loyalty, survival, or restoration. This is not limited to fiction. Human beings are more susceptible to harmful ideas when those ideas are attached to emotions they already feel. Fear, humiliation, resentment, alienation, and the desire to belong can make certainty appealing. A person who offers a clear enemy and a simple explanation can feel persuasive, especially when life is complicated and painful. The psychological structure is not people love evil. It is often people love relief. Relief from confusion. Relief from powerlessness. Relief from shame. Relief from feeling unseen. The villain may offer that relief at an extraordinary cost, but the offer usually arrives before the bill. Another reason audiences connect with villains is that villains are permitted to be openly ambitious. They want the throne, the money, the recognition, the revenge, the company, the city, the relationship, the legacy, or perhaps the entire known universe, because apparently moderation was unavailable. They do not pretend that they have no desire. In everyday life, ambition is treated inconsistently. People are encouraged to dream big but discouraged from appearing too hungry. They are told to believe in themselves, but warned not to think too highly of themselves. They are expected to succeed while making success look accidental and emotionally convenient for everyone nearby. The villain rarely performs that modesty. They want something and say so. That directness can be refreshing, even when the goal is absurd. The audience may not want domination, but they may recognize the desire to stop apologizing for wanting more. The villain becomes an exaggerated fantasy of unapologetic appetite. The problem, naturally, is that appetite without ethics eventually begins consuming people. Control is closely related to that appeal. Many villains begin as people who felt powerless and become obsessed with ensuring they will never feel powerless. Again, control becomes protection. Protection becomes domination. Domination becomes identity. The original fear may remain hidden beneath all of it. This is psychologically recognizable because ordinary people also create control strategies. After painful experiences, they become overly cautious, emotionally distant, perfectionistic, suspicious, or unwilling to depend on anyone. Most do not build underground headquarters, but the emotional blueprint can be familiar. That familiarity creates empathy. Empathy does not mean agreement. It means recognizing an emotion inside another person. You may understand the fear without accepting the behavior built around it. You may recognize the loneliness without forgiving the manipulation. You may see the wounded child without handing that child the keys to the kingdom. Mature empathy can hold compassion and accountability. At the same time, immature empathy assumes that because someone suffered, everything they do afterward must be understood as unavoidable. It is not. Sometimes people root for the villain because they see themselves in the rejection the villain experienced. The character was overlooked, underestimated, betrayed, mocked, excluded, or denied entry. Those experiences are common. The desire to prove everyone wrong is also common. The villain may become a revenge fantasy for anyone who has ever imagined returning to a place of humiliation with undeniable power. The emotional beginning feels relatable. The moral direction may not. This is why revenge stories can be so satisfying and so dangerous. Revenge promises emotional symmetry. You hurt me, therefore I hurt you. You embarrassed me, therefore I embarrass you. You took something from me, therefore I take something from you. The logic feels neat, but real consequences rarely remain. Neat, revenge spreads. Innocent people become involved. The original wound does not disappear. The person seeking control becomes controlled by the need to retaliate. Yet the fantasy remains appealing because it offers an immediate answer to helplessness. Heroes often ask people to tolerate discomfort while pursuing justice slowly. Villains offer emotional efficiency. No hearings, no appeals, no healing process, no difficult conversation, no acceptance that certain losses cannot be repaired, just action. That efficiency is fictional, of course. In reality, impulsive retaliation tends to create additional problems requiring considerably more paperwork. Still, the fantasy bypasses the frustrating patience of ordinary life. The villain may also feel more honest than the hero. Not more moral, but more honest about desire, anger, selfishness, or ambition. Heroes are sometimes written as symbols, and symbols can feel emotionally distant. They do the right thing because that is who they are. Villains often have to explain themselves because the audience needs to understand the deviation. As a result, the villain receives the better monologue. They are given the wound, the philosophy, the contradiction, the humor, the history, and the memorable speech. The hero receives a deadline and an injury. That imbalance can make the villain appear deeper, even when the hero is doing the harder psychological work. Restraint is less dramatic than explosion. Forgiveness is quieter than revenge. Consistency is less theatrical than collapse. Choosing not to hurt someone does not produce the same spectacle as destroying an entire organization before lunch. Yet restraint, repair, responsibility, and compassion often require more strength than domination. The problem is that strength expressed through control is easier to see than strength expressed through self-control. Though, psychological fascination with villains therefore reveals something slightly uncomfortable about attention itself. We do not always give our attention to what is best. We give it to what is intense. Intensity can imitate importance. A loud person may seem more meaningful than a thoughtful one. A destructive person may dominate the conversation while a reliable person quietly keeps everything functioning. A dramatic betrayal may receive more analysis than years of loyalty. Chaos announces itself. Stability rarely sends a press release. This does not make people foolish. It makes people human. The mind notices contrast. It responds to novelty. It tracks potential threats. It remembers emotionally charged events. Villains are constructed from those attention-grabbing ingredients. They are uncertain, powerful, wounded, angry, expressive, and willing to cross lines. They create movement. They force decisions. They reveal pressure points. The hero becomes visible, partly because the villain has made action necessary. There is also the private question lurking beneath the fascination. What would I become if I stopped controlling myself? What would I say if consequences disappeared? What would I do with unlimited power? Which rules do I follow because I believe in them? And which rules do I follow because I fear punishment? Would I remain generous if nobody could stop me from being selfish? Would I seek justice, revenge, or simply the satisfaction of winning? Fiction lets people approach those questions indirectly. We can project them onto a character and then observe the results. The answer is not always flattering. People like to imagine that power would reveal their goodness. It may. Power can also reveal appetite, insecurity, resentment, and the need for validation. The villain is often the character through whom a story examines what happens when ability expands faster than character. They gain the power to act before developing the wisdom to govern themselves. The tragedy is not merely that they become dangerous. It is that they confuse the absence of limits with freedom. Real freedom requires the ability to choose, including the ability to refuse your worst impulse. A person controlled by rage is not free. A person controlled by revenge is not free. A person who needs constant domination to feel secure is not powerful in the deepest sense. They are dependent upon control. Villains may appear liberated because they reject external rules, but many are imprisoned by internal compulsions. They cannot let go. They cannot forgive. They cannot accept loss. They cannot tolerate vulnerability. They must win because losing would force them to confront their original wound. That is why the villain can be psychologically fascinating and emotionally tragic at the same time. Beneath the confidence may be fear. Beneath the cruelty may be humiliation. Beneath the hunger for power may be the memory of powerlessness. None of this erases responsibility. It simply shows that destructive behavior often grows from recognizable emotional material. The distance between an ordinary wound and extraordinary harm is built from choices, reinforcement, opportunity, ideology, and their repeated refusal to stop. So when people root for the bad guy, they may be rooting for several different things without realizing it. They may be rooting for rebellion against a system they distrust. They may be rooting for confidence they wish they possessed. They may be rooting for the rejected person to prove everyone wrong. They may be rooting for honesty, even when that honesty is attached to cruelty. They may be exploring anger, revenge, or ambition from a safe distance. They may simply be captivated by unpredictability. And sometimes, they may not be rooting at all. They may merely be unable to look away. That is the psychological foundation. Beneath the villain's appeal, not a secret desire to destroy the world, although some people do become unusually emotional about fictional planets. It is the meeting point between attention, fear, fantasy, power, resentment, curiosity, and suppressed emotion. The villain becomes compelling because the villain takes familiar human impulses and removes the ordinary limits. What remains is larger, louder, more dangerous, and often more honest than we would prefer. The uncomfortable truth is that the villain is not fascinating because they are completely alien to us. They are fascinating because some part of them is recognizable. Not the crime, not the cruelty, not the destruction, the impulse before the action, the wound before the weapon, the anger before the decision, the desire to be seen, respected, protected, avenged, powerful, or free. Those emotions belong to ordinary human beings. Character is what determines what happens next.
WTNN. Damnation. I give it all up, no dramatic exit scene. Didn't flinch once, didn't beg to be seen. Memories are solitary, concrete in my head. Pacing like a verdict on something never said. Packed on my confession, all I dated my years. Poetry stacked heavy in receipts and fears. Said goodbye to mercy, I don't negotiate truth. Darkness isn't evil when it's weaponized youth. We know the difference, don't pretend we don't. Right and wrong bend when the pressure won't. Lyrics said softly, you were never the pawn. I built my own nowhere strong. I can play the bad guy, say the things you won't. Devil's advocate, truth in the undertone. You can try to hate me, I don't bruise that quick. Devil's advocate, twist the politics. Damn me, WBNN. When he needs to be, feed him what he craves. Temptation tastes elite when it's trust and good behavior. You wanted absolution but never took a stand. Wanted holy water with blood still on your hands. Confidence looks sacred until it's used to cage. Every saint I've ever met was marked in the rage. I laid to bed, no edits, no disguise. Confession isn't weakness, it's leverage in disguise. So was your producer, I tell you don't lie. We memorize the scripture, we weaponize the verse. Morality's elastic, depending who it stirs. Mirror said calmly, you're both divine and flawed. You call it rebellion, I call it applause. I can play the villain, wear it like a crown. Devil's advocate, I don't back down. You can scream damnation like it's my disease. Devil's advocate, say it with me, please. Damnation. Damnation. These idle hands drafted war. You preach restraint and crave the score. You quote restraint and chase the sin. Wash your halo and triple linen. No power in play, no virtue in fear. You call it fate, I call it career. You blame the serpent to save your pride, but the apple was yours, you just needed a guide. Lyrically chambered, bound in the head, loaded with doubt in the things you said. You said you love me, convenient truth. Love's just leverage and tailored suits. No spotless saints, no pure disgrace, just curated masks and curated grace. Devil's advocate, no, that's a shield. I just expose what you conceal. Damnation. Order in the court. Exhibit A, your intention. You wanted heaven without inspection. You wanted pleasure without reflection. You wanted power without correction. Convenient religion, you call me corrupt. That you go first every lie. You needed a villain so you could feel sanctified. If I was your producer, I'd skip these excuses for no jury, no judge, just appetite. And the law you bend, so tell me when you pulled the trigger, was it fear or was it presence? Case closed. Compare the bad guy, woman narrative, devil's advocate. That's comparative. You can chant damnation, that was prophecy. Devil's advocate, bring it best like me. No black or white, just appetite within. Devil's advocate. Message on the inside. Damnation.
Long before movies, comic books, podcasts, streaming services, or 24-hour news cycles, humanity was already telling stories about villains. Every civilization on Earth, regardless of language, religion, geography, or culture, developed narratives centered around an opposing force. Sometimes it was a monster, sometimes it was a tyrant, sometimes it was a serpent, a dragon, a trickster, a jealous sibling, a corrupt ruler, or even the darkness hiding inside the hero themselves. What is fascinating is not that every culture invented heroes that almost feels expected. What is remarkable is that every culture also invented villains. Different names, different appearances, different motivations, yet somehow serving nearly identical purposes. That should tell us something profound about human nature. A villain gives shape to fear. Fear by itself is invisible. Anxiety has no face. Chaos has no personality. But the moment those emotions are wrapped inside a character, suddenly they become easier to understand. Dragons become greed. Witches become suspicion. Kings become corruption. Monsters become famine. Demons become temptation. Tricksters become distrust. The villain allows an abstract danger to become something the human mind can point toward. Human beings have always understood stories more easily than statistics, and we have always remembered their faces more vividly than concepts. Ancient myths were not simply entertainment passed around a campfire. They were operating manuals for survival. They taught children who to trust, adults what to avoid, leaders how power could corrupt them, and communities what happened when selfishness outweighed cooperation. Before formal schools, psychology, textbooks, legal systems, or public service announcements, there were stories. The warning arrived through a creature in the forest, a jealous god, a deceptive stranger, or an arrogant ruler who believed the rules no longer applied to them. The villain was never merely there to lose. The villain existed to demonstrate consequences. What happens when pride goes unchecked? What happens when ambition becomes obsession? What happens when revenge feels more satisfying than forgiveness? What happens when a person gains power but loses accountability? Every generation answered those questions with different costumes, but remarkably similar stories. The landscape changed, the language changed, and the weapons changed. But the warning remained familiar. As societies developed, their villains evolved alongside them. When human beings feared the wilderness, villains were creatures hiding beyond the firelight. When kingdoms and empires dominated public life, villains became cruel monarchs, invading armies, traitorous advisors, and rulers poisoned by their own authority. When industrialization transformed the world, stories began producing ruthless factory owners, mad inventors, mechanized threats, and cold institutions that treated human beings like replaceable parts. The villain kept changing because fear kept changing. That pattern continues today. Modern villains are often corporations, governments, algorithms, surveillance systems, artificial intelligence, billionaires, media empires, criminal organizations, or anonymous forces operating behind layers of technology. We are less likely to imagine danger waiting inside a cave, and more likely to imagine it waiting inside a server, a boardroom, a laboratory, or a terms and conditions agreement nobody read. Apparently, humanity defeated the dragon only to discover the dragon had incorporated, hired legal representation, and launched an app. The details may be new, but the underlying function remains the same. Villains embody whatever a society believes. They overpower it. During periods of disease, stories produce contamination, mutation, and invisible threats. During periods of war, villains become invaders, spies, dictators, or ideological enemies. During periods of rapid technological change, they become machines, clones, artificial minds, or creators who lose control of their creations. During periods of economic instability, they become greedy financiers, exploitative employers, corrupt institutions, or wealthy figures insulated from the consequences of their decisions. Every era reveals itself through the villains it creates. A culture's heroes tell us what it admires, but its villains often tell us what it fears. That may be why villain stories remain such valuable cultural evidence. They preserve the anxieties of their time. They show us what people believed could destroy the family, corrupt the community, destabilize the nation, contaminate the future, or replace the individual. Sometimes the fear was justified. Sometimes it was exaggerated. Sometimes it was aimed at the wrong people entirely. That last part matters because cultures do not only create fictional villains, they create social villains as well. Groups of people have repeatedly been portrayed as dangerous because they were unfamiliar, politically inconvenient, economically vulnerable, racially different, religiously different, sexually different, or simply unwilling to obey the accepted social order. History is full of moments when fear was converted into propaganda, and propaganda was converted into permission. Once someone has been labeled the enemy, cruelty toward them becomes easier to rationalize. This is where the villain becomes more than a storytelling device. The villain can become a political tool. Leaders throughout history have understood that frightened people are easier to organize when they are given a common enemy. Complicated problems can be reduced to a person, a group, or a symbol. Economic struggle becomes their fault. Social unrest becomes their fault. Cultural change becomes their fault. Once the villain has been selected, the public is encouraged to stop asking broader questions about systems, leadership, responsibility, and power. The strategy works because certainty is emotionally comforting. It feels easier to believe one bad person caused everything than to confront a tangled collection of institutions, incentives, mistakes, and unintended consequences. A single villain gives a story a clean structure. There is someone to blame, someone to punish, and someone whose removal promises resolution. Reality, unfortunately, is rarely that cooperative. That desire for simplicity helps explain why societies sometimes keep villains alive symbolically long after the original threat has disappeared. The name becomes shorthand. The image becomes an emotional trigger. The story becomes easier to repeat than the historical details surrounding it. Eventually, the villain may become less of a person and more of a container into which a culture pours everything it dislikes. Interestingly, the most enduring villains rarely believe they are villains. That is almost never how human beings experience themselves. Most people are remarkably skilled at constructing reasons for their own behavior. They describe domination as protection, revenge as justice, greed as ambition, censorship as safety, cruelty as discipline, and control as love. Nearly everyone sees themselves as the hero of their own internal narration, even while creating extraordinary damage inside someone else's story. That uncomfortable truth is one reason compelling villains endure. They remind us that perspective changes everything. The same action can be interpreted as justice by one person and cruelty by another. The same rebellion can be called liberation by those participating in it, and criminality by those benefiting from the existing order. History itself often depends on who survived, who gained authority, who controlled the record, and who was permitted to tell the story afterward. Yesterday's villain sometimes becomes tomorrow's hero. Individuals condemned in one generation are celebrated in another. Revolutionaries were branded criminals before becoming founding figures. Protesters were described as disruptive before their causes became socially acceptable. Inventors were mocked before becoming visionaries. Artists were ridiculed before becoming legends. People who challenged unjust traditions were often treated as dangerous precisely because their ideas threatened those who were comfortable. The reverse also happens. Heroes fall from grace as new information reshapes our understanding of their actions. A celebrated leader becomes more complicated when ignored victims are finally heard. A cultural icon looks different when the machinery behind their success becomes visible. A supposedly noble institution appears less noble once hidden records are examined. Time has a funny way of rewriting biographies, especially when people who were previously silenced gain the ability to contribute their side of the story. That does not mean morality is meaningless, or that every villain has secretly been misunderstood. Certain actions, violence, exploitation, cruelty, abuse, oppression remain destructive, regardless of who is describing them. Context may explain behavior, but it does not magically erase consequences. Understanding why someone caused harm is not the same as declaring the harm acceptable. That distinction becomes especially important when audiences become emotionally invested in complicated characters. What history demonstrates is that reputation is fluid. Public opinion moves, culture shifts, new evidence emerges, values evolve. The villain we thought we fully understood sometimes becomes more complicated, while the flawless hero we once admired begins revealing uncomfortable imperfections. Reality resists the clean moral lines that fiction often provides, which may be why modern storytelling increasingly embraces the antihero. The antihero occupies the space between admiration and alarm. They may be selfish, reckless, violent, dishonest, or emotionally damaged, yet the story still invites us to travel alongside them. The audience is not necessarily asked to approve. We are asked to observe, understand, and occasionally recognize something familiar. The anti-hero reflects a culture that has become suspicious of perfection. We no longer completely trust the spotless hero who always says the right thing, makes the right decision, and appears untouched by contradiction. Perhaps that suspicion comes from experience. We have watched too many public heroes become human under closer examination. We have learned that institutions protect reputations, that biographies omit inconvenient facts, and that polished images are often carefully managed products. The antihero feels honest because their flaws are visible from the beginning. There is no dramatic unveiling of imperfection because imperfection is already part of the introduction. Modern audiences are also surrounded by competing narratives. A person can be presented as a hero on one platform, a villain on another, a misunderstood genius in one documentary, and a dangerous fraud in the next. We no longer encounter a single version of the story. We encounter edits, clips, reactions, commentary, leaked messages, public statements, corrections, apologies, accusations, and people confidently explaining situations they discovered 12 minutes ago. Every headline seems to require a protagonist and an antagonist before all the facts are available. Social media accelerates that process, rewarding certainty over nuance and outrage over patience. Within hours, millions of strangers can collectively decide who deserves applause and who deserves condemnation. The public trial begins immediately, often with limited evidence and unlimited confidence. Weeks later, months later, sometimes years later, additional context may appear that changes the entire narrative. The story evolves. But first impressions have a remarkable tendency to linger. Once a person has been assigned the villain role, every action is interpreted through that identity. Silence becomes guilt. Speaking becomes manipulation. An apology becomes strategy. Refusing to apologize becomes arrogance. Even neutral behavior can be presented as evidence of hidden motives. The audience is no longer evaluating individual actions. It is protecting the story it has already chosen. This is not limited to celebrities, politicians, or public figures. Families assign villains. Friend groups assign villains. Workplaces assign villains. Relationships assign villains. When conflict occurs, people naturally organize events into narratives that preserve their own innocence. Details supporting that narrative are emphasized. Details complicating it are minimized. The former partner becomes toxic. The former employee becomes disloyal. The estranged relative becomes impossible. Maybe they were, maybe they were not. Frequently, the truth is less convenient than either side would prefer. Perhaps that is why the best storytelling refuses to make villains one-dimensional. A cardboard villain may serve the plot, but a layered villain serves the audience. Complexity forces us to think rather than merely react. It challenges us to separate understanding from agreement. We can examine someone's motivations without endorsing their decisions. We can acknowledge their humanity without excusing their harm. We can understand the wound while still holding the person responsible for what they chose to do with it. That may be one of the most important skills a story can teach, not only for consuming fiction, but for participating in society. The ability to resist instant moral categorization does not make a person weak or indecisive. It means they are willing to examine evidence before joining the crowd. It means they recognize that empathy and accountability can exist in the same room. It means they understand that a person can be injured and still injure others, oppressed in one context and oppressive in another, generous in one relationship and destructive in the next. Maybe the greatest lesson history teaches is not simply that villains always exist. It is that every generation believes it has finally identified all of them. Then time passes, context expands, records are uncovered, perspective matures. People once dismissed begin speaking for themselves. Suddenly, the lines become less comfortable. Heroes become more human. Villains become more understandable. Institutions become more accountable. The story grows richer, not because good and evil disappeared, but because reality rarely fits inside the neat categories our minds prefer. And maybe that is why we have never stopped telling stories about the bad guy. The villain is not simply standing in the hero's way. The villain is carrying the fears, prejudices, anxieties, temptations, and contradictions of the culture that created them. Sometimes they warn us about danger. Sometimes they reveal who holds power. Sometimes they expose what society is unwilling to admit about itself. And sometimes, more often than we would like to acknowledge, the villain is standing between certainty and understanding, forcing us to wrestle with questions that refuse to provide comfortable answers.
Place my lips upon yours, feel every twitch, every urge, and surrender my conscience to your needs, to your heat, to your madness. I'd give all things to my baby, even my mind. Each time the wind begins to blow, I hope my words make their way through this long, never-ending space of one mind, yet so far away. Whispers on the wind, passionate thoughts tickle your ears a little wet. Can you feel me pretend on a lonely night I was your hands, your own desire, your own pleasure? To define a soulmate is a beam of light so bright it hurts, but still you stare inside, you feel the power, a pull toward God, toward love, toward me. There's nothing you wouldn't do, nothing you wouldn't give, that's what it is. You could be my soulmate. Do you think I joke about the future? You said I could love you just not like that, but I never asked for more than a witness to my becoming, to watch me grow, to call my name when the nights felt too long, 700 miles away. I never wanted to beg, but I did silently, and I still do. If I had to relearn how to kiss you, I would place my lips upon yours and follow every impulse, from a whisper to a scream, till my mind became yours. You are all things to me, yes, my baby, all things to me. I know I sound crazy, but I'm not asking you to love me. I just want you to see me, to remember. Told you I'd always write poems, and here I am writing while you're silent. Are you ever gonna call again? I just wanna hear your voice. Is that so dangerous?
is a major difference between liking a bad person and being placed inside a story that makes their success feel important. Storytelling can make an audience emotionally participate in almost anything if the structure is strong enough. We do not necessarily root for the bad guy because we approve of what they are doing. Sometimes we root for them because the story has quietly trained us to experience the world through their eyes. We know what they want. We understand what stands in their way. We see the pressure building around them. We are given access to their private thoughts, their fears, their humiliations, and the small collection of reasons they use to justify the next terrible decision. Before long, we are no longer watching the bad guy from a safe, moral distance. We are moving through the story beside them. Point of view is one of the most powerful tools in storytelling because the character who receives the most attention often receives the most understanding. That does not mean they deserve it. It means familiarity creates attachment. The longer we remain with a character, the more likely we are to notice their routines, contradictions, relationships, and vulnerabilities. A stranger committing a harmful act may appear monstrous. A central character committing the same act arrives surrounded by context. We know what happened to them earlier that morning. We know what they're afraid of losing. We know which wound has never healed. Context does not erase wrongdoing, but it changes the emotional temperature of the scene. The camera, narrator, or writer can create loyalty simply by deciding whose struggle matters most. When the bad guy becomes the central character, the obstacle standing in front of them begins functioning like the enemy, even when that obstacle is morally correct. A detective pursuing a criminal may be doing exactly what justice requires. Yet if the story has placed us inside the criminal's escape, the detective feels like a threat. We begin hoping the door closes in time, the evidence disappears, the car starts, or the lie survives one more conversation. Morally, we understand the pursuit. Emotionally, we are already hiding in the getaway vehicle. That is the trick. A story does not always ask the audience to approve. It asks the audience to anticipate. Anticipation is powerful because it keeps us emotionally invested in an outcome before we have fully considered whether that outcome is good. Once the plan has been explained, the audience wants to see whether it works. Once the escape route has been established, we watch for the weak point. Once the character has announced what they intend to accomplish, our attention becomes attached to execution. Curiosity begins doing some of the work that morality normally would. Competence makes this even more effective. Audiences are naturally drawn to people who are exceptionally good at something, even when the thing they are good at is not admirable. A mastermind who plans 10 steps ahead can be fascinating. A thief who enters an impossible location can become exhilarating. A manipulator who reads a room with perfect accuracy can hold our attention because skill itself has dramatic value. We admire precision, discipline, creativity, nerve, and intelligence. The character's purpose may be destructive, but the performance of expertise is still satisfying to watch. This is one reason the clumsy villain rarely inspires the same devotion as the controlled one. Failure can be funny, but command is magnetic. A villain who appears fully aware of the environment creates the impression that nothing is accidental. They enter a room and understand the hierarchy. They speak less because they do not need to prove they are in control. Their confidence becomes part of the spectacle. Even when the story eventually defeats them, the audience may continue admiring the design of the operation. The villain also benefits when the hero is written without equal depth. A flawless hero may be morally correct, but emotionally distant. If the hero is always brave, always disciplined, always patient, and always prepared with the proper lesson. They may begin to feel less like a person and more like a professionally designed wall poster. Meanwhile, the villain is allowed to be funny, wounded, arrogant, petty, stylish, impulsive, intelligent, insecure, and unpredictable. One character represents the approved answer. The other represents actual dramatic possibility. Stories require movement, and villains often create it. The hero may want stability, but the villain changes the conditions. The hero protects the world as it exists. The villain arrives with a demand, a disruption, or an idea dangerous enough to force everyone else into motion. Without that disruption, there may be no story at all. The villain enters, and suddenly secrets must be exposed. Loyalties must be tested. Institutions must respond, and characters who are comfortable must reveal what they truly value. That does not make the villain correct, but it often makes them narratively essential. They ask the question the hero would prefer to avoid. They exposed the weakness in the system. They identified the hypocrisy everyone else agreed not to mention. They may offer a terrible solution, but the problem they describe can still be real. This creates one of the most compelling forms of moral tension. The villain is wrong in method, but not entirely wrong in observation. A powerful antagonist may recognize that the institution is corrupt, the leadership is dishonest, the social order is unfair, or the hero's version of peace depends on somebody else remaining powerless. The villain sees the crack clearly. The danger lies in what they decide should be done about it. They move from diagnosis to domination, from reform to revenge, from liberation to personal control. Yet because the original complaint contained truth, the audience cannot dismiss them completely. This is where the phrase, "the villain has a point," becomes complicated. Having a point is not the same as having the answer. A person may correctly identify injustice and still respond unjustly. They may expose hypocrisy while practicing a more dangerous version of it. They may claim to oppose oppression while becoming obsessed with deciding who deserves power. The audience senses that contradiction, and contradiction is dramatically alive. Sometimes the villain is also the only person speaking honestly. Everyone else in the story is maintaining appearances, protecting reputations, or hiding behind polite language. The villain walks in and says what the room already knows. Their honesty may be cruel, selective, or self-serving, but it creates relief. Someone has finally disrupted the performance. Someone has finally named a thing everyone else was carefully stepping around. That bluntness can feel refreshing, especially when the surrounding characters are hypocritical. The villain may not be kind, but they are clear. They do not pretend to be generous while taking advantage of people. They do not smile while quietly arranging someone's downfall. They announce their appetite, their ambition, or their resentment without requiring the audience to decode it. In a story filled with hidden motives, open selfishness can seem almost trustworthy. Humor strengthens that bond. A villain who can make the audience laugh gains access to a different part of our attention. Humor creates rhythm, familiarity, and temporary relief from tension. It also makes confidence appear effortless. The character does not seem intimidated by the situation because they can still joke inside it. The joke may be cruel, inappropriate, or aimed at the wrong person, but laughter briefly creates alignment. For a moment, the audience and the villain understand the same absurdity. Charm works in a similar way. Charm is not goodness, it is social fluency. A charming villain knows how to make people feel noticed, entertained, or temporarily safe. They may flatter, tease, confess selectively, or present their worst qualities with such self-awareness that honesty begins resembling accountability. The audience thinks, at least they know what they are. But recognizing a flaw is not the same as correcting it. Some characters use self-awareness as decoration. The story may also give the villain tenderness in carefully chosen places. They may love one person sincerely. They may protect a child, care for an animal, honor a promise, or show patience towards someone the rest of the world ignores. These moments matter because they complicate the audience's emotional response. Cruelty becomes harder to place when it exists beside genuine affection. We are reminded that harmful people are not harmful every second of every day. That truth is uncomfortable because real people are also inconsistent. Someone can be generous to friends and cruel to strangers. They can be loving inside the family while destructive outside it. They can perform kindness in one context and abuse power in another. Fictional villains become believable when they are permitted this uneven humanity. They do not need to be secretly good. They only need to be recognizably human. Relationships reveal another side of them. The villain alone may appear invincible, but the villain with someone they love becomes vulnerable to consequence. Suddenly, there is something they cannot control through force. Something can be lost. Someone can reject them. Someone remembers who they were before the performance, the armor, or the title. That relationship may be the only place where the villain stops speaking like a villain and begins speaking like a person. Once the audience sees that private version, the public version becomes more compelling. We begin looking for traces of the human being beneath the strategy. We notice hesitation. We study the pause before violence. We wonder whether they are capable of changing. That possibility can keep an audience emotionally invested long after the character has crossed any reasonable moral boundary. Redemption becomes tempting because storytelling teaches us to search for movement. We want characters to become something they were not at the beginning. The worse the starting point, the greater the potential transformation. A mildly rude person learning patience is respectable. A destructive person discovering conscience feels dramatic. The distance between who they are and who they might become creates hope. Even when the evidence supporting that hope is extremely thin, audiences can become very generous with imagined potential. We see one decent act and begin writing the redemption ourselves. We interpret hesitation as remorse, loneliness as growth, and emotional pain as proof that change is coming. Sometimes the story rewards that patience. Sometimes it uses that hope to demonstrate how easily charisma can be mistaken for character development. This resembles real life. Relationships more than people may want to admit. Human beings often remain attached not only to who someone is, but to who they believe that person could become. Potential becomes an emotional investment. We excuse the present because we are waiting for the future version. Stories understand this. They give the villain a doorway toward change and allow the audience to spend episode after episode wondering whether they will finally walk through it. The villain may also be surrounded by people worse than they are. This is a simple but effective narrative strategy. Place a morally compromised character inside an even more corrupt environment, and suddenly their limits become virtues. They may steal, manipulate, or threaten, but perhaps they refuse to harm children. Perhaps they keep their word when everyone else lies. Perhaps they show loyalty inside a world built on betrayal. The standard has not risen. The comparison has fallen. Relative morality can transform the audience's judgment without changing the character's behavior. They are not good. They are simply less terrible than the available alternatives. In a morally broken world, restraint begins to resemble honor. The audience starts measuring the villain not against an ideal, but against the people standing beside them. This can produce a dangerous kind of admiration, but it can also produce meaningful storytelling. It forces us to examine how moral judgment changes under pressure. What does decency look like inside an indecent system? How much credit should someone receive for refusing the worst option while continuing to participate in the larger harm? Can a code of conduct make a destructive person honorable, or does it merely make them organized? The answer often depends on what the story chooses to emphasize. Music can make cruelty feel tragic. Editing can make violence feel triumphant. Lighting can make isolation feel noble. A carefully timed flashback can transform a decision from shocking to emotionally inevitable. Storytelling techniques do not merely present events. They instruct the audience how to feel while those events occur. A slow close-up invites contemplation. A triumphant score invites approval. A humorous reaction invites distance from the harm. A cutaway to the villain's pain invites sympathy. At the exact moment, accountability might otherwise take control. None of this means the audience is being fooled. It means art is emotional architecture. The storyteller decides which doors open first. Music is especially powerful because it can create emotional loyalty before the character has earned it. Give a villain a memorable theme, and their arrival becomes an event. The sound announces danger, but it also announces confidence, mystery, and anticipation. We begin waiting for them because the story becomes more alive when they appear. Their presence changes the temperature of the entire scene. Style contributes as well. Villains are often given sharper dialogue, more distinctive clothing, bolder entrances, and more recognizable visual identities. Heroes may be designed to represent stability, while villains are designed to be remembered. The villain gets the unusual silhouette, the dramatic color, the controlled movement, the voice that sounds like it knows something everyone else does not. That design is not accidental. A great villain must compete with the hero for the audiences. Attention, and attention is won through specificity. The character needs a worldview, not merely a threat. They need language that belongs to them. They need a way of moving through the world that reveals personality before the dialogue begins. Once that identity becomes strong enough, the audience may begin looking forward to the disruption. There is also freedom in watching someone ignore the rules. Most people live inside constant restraint. We wait, negotiate, compromise, follow procedures, observe laws, protect reputations, and consider consequences. The villain often refuses all of that. They say what others swallow. They take what others merely desire. They leave the conversation instead of explaining themselves. They reject approval before approval has the chance to reject them. That freedom is not necessarily admirable, but it can be emotionally exciting. Fiction provides a controlled space where audiences can experience rule-breaking without inheriting the consequences. The villain acts out the impulse while the audience remains seated safely outside it. We do not need to become reckless in order to understand the fantasy of no longer asking permission. The fantasy becomes especially strong when the rules themselves appear unfair. A villain who breaks a corrupt law humiliates an abusive authority figure or exposes an elite institution may receive cheers before the audience has evaluated what else they are doing. The rebellion feels satisfying because it strikes a recognizable target. The story then has the opportunity to ask whether resistance remains righteous once it becomes personal ambition. That is often the dividing line between a rebel and a tyrant. Both reject the existing order. The rebel wants to prevent power from controlling everyone. The tyrant wants to become the person doing the controlling. They may begin with the same complaint, use similar language, and attract the same frustrated supporters. The difference appears when victory becomes possible. One distributes power, the other collects it. A sophisticated story allows that transition to unfold gradually. The character begins as a challenger, becomes a leader, then slowly starts treating disagreement as betrayal. Protection becomes surveillance. Unity becomes obedience. The audience may continue rooting for them because emotional loyalty was established. Earlier, we remember the moment their anger seemed justified, even while the anger is now serving something else. This is another reason narrative alignment matters. Once we have traveled with a character through struggle, we may resist admitting they have become the danger. Letting go of them means admitting our earlier sympathy led us somewhere uncomfortable. The story tests whether the audience can update its judgment when the evidence changes. That is a difficult test because emotional investment creates inertia. People prefer continuity. We want the person we supported to remain supportable. We reinterpret new information so it fits the original attachment. Fiction can expose this tendency safely. It can show us how loyalty becomes denial, how admiration becomes excuse, and how a compelling beginning can keep us attached to a destructive ending. Yet the purpose of these stories is not always to scold the audience for caring. Caring is what makes the moral question meaningful. If the villain were impossible to understand, rejecting them would require nothing. The challenge appears when we understand them deeply and still decide that understanding has limits. The strongest stories do not force us to choose between empathy and judgment. They allow both. We can feel the loneliness without endorsing the cruelty. We can recognize the injustice that shaped them without pretending it dictated every decision. We can hope for redemption while accepting that some consequences cannot be avoided. We can admire their intelligence and still fear what they choose to do with it. That is the complete power of narrative alignment. The story places us close enough to the bad guy that easy judgment becomes impossible, but not so close that responsibility disappears. We are invited into the plan, the pain, the charm, the talent, the contradiction, and the possibility of change. Then we are left with the uncomfortable task of deciding how much understanding should matter. Perhaps that is why rooting for the bad guy can feel so intense. We are not only watching someone cross the line, we are watching from a position the story carefully created for us. We know the route. We understand the motive. We have heard the explanation. We have witnessed the private moments no one else inside the story was allowed to see. And now, whether we approve of them or not, part of us wants to know how far they can get before the world finally catches up.
Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. I'm looking for a hero. I'm looking for a hero. Look up in the sky. It's a bird, it's a plane. I'm looking for a hero. I'm looking for a hero. Look up in the sky. It's a bird, it's a plane. Hero, hero, hero. Dun, 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 the blessed gift, and I had to bring it right back. I'm bringing this soul, I'll attack. I'm bringing that knowledge you lack. We look up to the sky, tell me that the heavens ain't all they supply. Everything that we know to be great. Wake up, y'all, we're a little bit late. Damnation. Hero. We're looking for a hero. If I was your producer, look up in the sky. It's a bird, it's a plane. It's a shame that Constantine didn't know what he was saying. He named it after the cross. He was wrong. A starship, oh, the war was lost. Coming to intervene in our world. Coming to bring knowledge to boys and girls. Come now, download this. Because of denial, there's so much we miss. I'm looking for a hero. I'm looking for a hero. Look up in the sky.